I'm Meredith Blake, 33 years old, and last weekend at a family gathering, I whispered one sentence to my sister that turned everything upside down. Within minutes, I saw her eyes change, her smile fade, and the room tilt in a way that made me question every connection. I thought I understood. That night I learned what people will do when they believe money is involved and who they become when they think no one's watching. The moment she slipped the paper from my hand and disappeared. I knew it wasn't just a prank anymore. It was a test. I hadn't meant to start but couldn't stop by the time I left that night. I saw my family in a way I never had before I take you into what happened. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and if you've ever felt like the only person in your family who gives more than they take, hit that like and subscribe button and tell me what time it is where you are. I'd love to know how far these stories reach. I live in Santa Fe now, but I was raised between two homes that never quite healed from divorce. My parents split when I was 12, and everything that followed seemed to fall into two camps. My dad's side with polished smiles and sharp wine glasses, and my mom's side with handmade holiday wreaths and coupons tucked into birthday cards. I grew up with my feet in both worlds, always trying to bridge the gap, always trying to be the one who kept the peace. Even back then, I learned that being agreeable was the fastest way to avoid being left out. After college, I became an elementary school teacher, 2nd grade. The job doesn't come with prestige or padded paychecks, but it gave me a purpose I could stand on. Most days, I'd be up by 6, packing a cheap lunch driving my 13-year-old Honda Civic to school, and spending the day teaching spelling, helping tie shoelaces, and wiping away more tears than I could count. My apartment was modest, 1 bedroom off a quiet street near the edge of town, and most of my paycheck went to rent student loans and family favors I rarely got back. Everyone in my family wore a different kind of mask. My brother Evan talked big about startups and investment rounds, but called me for emergency loans that turned into photos of ski trips. My sister Jenna lived in a gated neighborhood with her surgeon husband and 2 kids, always posting perfect family photos and asking for money just until the promotion comes through. Dad remarried Colleen, who loved to hint at her next luxury retreat while pretending not to remember my birthday. Mom tried her best, but leaned on me when her boutique came up short, and her husband Frank kept his checkbook shut tight while showing off his latest golf club set. Then there was Aunt Laura, my mother's sister. Retired librarian, lived alone, always remembered the little things. Never asked for anything, never took sides. And Aunt Nancy, my father's sister, married rich and liked to remind everyone of it. Her daughter Allison played the friendly cousin role, texting me recipes and compliments while quietly feeding everything I said to her mother. I stopped expecting fairness a long time ago. I gave out of habit, not hope. One $3,000 loan here, a $1,500 favor there, birthdays, home repairs, baby showers, boutique emergencies. It piled up quietly like snow on a roof. Casey, my best friend since nursing school days, was the only one who ever pointed it out. "Mir," she said once, pouring wine at her kitchen table, "they see you as a bank, not a sister." Still, I kept showing up. Every birthday, every barbecue. I didn't want to be the one who gave up on family. But last Friday on my birthday, everything changed. That morning started like any other, with a crying student, a late coffee, and a stack of papers I didn't have time to grade. Derek, a fellow teacher, noticed the bags under my eyes and offered to grab me lunch. I thanked him but waved it off. After school, I drove to Joe McCarthy's corner store like I always did, bought my usual lottery ticket, and just for fun, added one more with numbers that meant something to me. Birthdays, anniversaries, old family dates. Joe smiled and said, "Your grandma used to pick numbers like those." I laughed it off, not knowing that by nightfall, I'd be pacing my apartment floor in disbelief. Because that extra ticket, it changed everything. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in one hand, lottery ticket in the other, rereading the numbers on the screen. At first I thought I'd misread something, but I hadn't. Every single number matched from my birthday to Aunt Laura's. I checked it 3 more times, blinking hard like maybe the numbers would change, but they didn't. I was the sole winner. $50 million. After taxes, about $30 million. That night I didn't sleep. I walked circles through my apartment, still dressed in the slacks I'd worn to school. I searched online for stories about lottery winners. Most of them weren't comforting. Families torn apart winners, taken advantage of strangers showing up at their doors. The money never stayed private for long. A few kept it secret, claimed through lawyers or trusts, and those were the ones who kept their peace. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark trying to decide what kind of person I was going to be now. By sunrise, I had made 2 decisions. I'd claim the money, but I wouldn't tell a soul. Not yet. And before anyone found out, I needed help, professional help. I called in sick to school for the first time in months. My voice sounded hoarse, like I'd run a marathon in my sleep. I told the office it was a migraine and promised to be back Monday. Then I drove into downtown Santa Fe and parked outside a tall building I'd only ever passed on field trip days. The office belonged to a financial attorney named Graham Fields. He'd been recommended by someone Casey knew through the hospital. I walked in wearing jeans and a cardigan, trying not to look out of place among the suits and leather briefcases. When Graham came out to meet me, he greeted me with a calm handshake and offered me coffee. We sat in a glass-walled room with quiet music playing in the background. He asked what brought me in, and I pulled the folded ticket from my purse and set it on the table. He didn't react right away. He checked the numbers online, then leaned back in his chair and nodded once. "Congratulations," he said, keeping his voice low, "and you're right to come here quietly." For the next hour, we went through every option. In New Mexico, I could claim the prize through a blind trust. Graham walked me through the paperwork, tax withholdings, investment accounts, property laws. He didn't pressure. He just laid out the path like a map, pointing to every bend and warning me where people usually go wrong. "Tell no one until it's secure," he said, "especially not family. It changes things. I've seen it ruin the closest bonds." I left his office with a folder of documents and a wired plan to funnel the money into secured accounts. No sudden lifestyle shifts, no new cars, no public donations, just quiet, careful moves. And yet I still couldn't sit still when I got home. I went to the grocery store in my old Honda, picked up frozen dinners like always, and texted Casey about bills to keep up appearances. That evening I met Casey for dinner at a little Italian place we liked off Cirillo's Road. She asked about my day and I told her half the truth. I said I'd come into money, not how much, just that it was a significant amount, and I needed advice. She listened, stirring her drink with one hand and watching me closely. I explained how I wanted to test the people around me, not out of spite, but to understand who would really show up if I needed help. Casey frowned. "You're going to pretend to lose it." "Not exactly," I said. "I want to see what they do if they think I had something, then lost it, and then ask for help." She hesitated. "Meredith, that sounds risky. I just need to know." I said, "They've taken so much already. I want to see what happens when the script flips." She sighed, then leaned back in her seat. "All right, but you'd better make it believable." We sat for another hour, sketching out the plan like it was a school project. I would start at the upcoming family gathering. Aunt Nancy was hosting a barbecue for her birthday. I'd pull Jenna aside, show her a fake $1 million ticket, then pretend it got stolen. A few days later, I'd tell the family I needed help. $4,000. Just to cover rent and medical bills, a heart test maybe, something real enough to tug at them. We made predictions. Evan would offer words, then disappear. Jenna would deflect, probably blame the kids. Dad would get stern. Mom would pass it off to Frank. Aunt Nancy would scoff. Allison would smile, nod, and report back. And Aunt Laura. Casey paused at that name. "She's the only one I'm not sure about," she said. The days leading up to the barbecue felt like rehearsals. I printed a fake ticket, made it look worn, scribbled numbers that matched the ones I'd chosen that Friday. I even crumpled it a little, tucked it into my purse where it would look naturally used. I practiced how I'd say it, how I'd look surprised but nervous, how I'd laugh like it wasn't a big deal. The barbecue was held at Aunt Nancy's house just outside the city. Big backyard white patio furniture, glass vases with floating candles. Everything always felt too polished there, like you had to earn your seat. I brought a tray of enchiladas and set them on the buffet, hugging people with my usual careful smile. Colleen arrived first, commenting on my outfit like it didn't quite measure up. Frank followed, complaining about traffic. Dad gave me a half-hearted side hug. Mom asked about school but didn't wait for the answer. Allison lingered by the drinks phone in hand, glancing my way. Evan showed up late, talking fast about crypto. I waited until dusk. The grill was cooling and people were starting to drift toward dessert. I pulled Jenna aside near the edge of the yard behind a row of hydrangeas. I kept my voice low. "Hey," I said, slipping the ticket into her hand. "Don't tell anyone yet. I just won $1 million. She blinked, then stared at it. "No way," she whispered. Her eyes darted to the numbers, then back at me. "You're serious?" I nodded. She smiled wide and strange. "I have to use the bathroom," she said, already turning. She tucked the ticket into her purse and disappeared into the house. I waited. 5 minutes, then 10. Allison came over asking if I was okay. I said something vague. Later I would find out she had texted Aunt Nancy and Colleen within minutes. By the time the party wound down, half the family was acting just a little differently. Hugs felt tighter. Smiles lasted a second too long. I pretended to search my purse, frowning as I zipped it shut. "I think I lost it," I murmured to no one in particular. Dad said, "Well, that's a lesson in being more careful." Mom suggested I check again. Colleen raised an eyebrow and smirked. "You always were forgetful." As I walked to my car, Ryan Chu, the real estate guy I'd met a week earlier, caught me before I left. When I looked at your place, he said I noticed some old paperwork in the attic. Looked like debt stuff. "From your dad's name, maybe?" "Thought you should know." I thanked him and drove home. The sun had set and the highway lights blurred through my windshield. My phone buzzed just before I pulled into the lot. It was Matthew, Jenna's husband. "I heard about the ticket," he said, his voice too cheerful. "If you don't split it, maybe I just toss it for fun." What do you think? I hung up without answering. It was just paper after all. But the damage had already begun. By morning, my phone was already lit up. 32 missed calls, 17 texts. Half were from Jenna, a few from Matthew. Even Aunt Nancy had left a voicemail. All of them before 7 a.m. I sat on the couch in my robe, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the notifications pile up like falling dominoes. Not a single person asked if I was all right. Every message circled the same thing, the ticket. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened my notebook and turned to a clean page. I wrote the date at the top and a single line underneath. "Let's see who shows up when I have nothing." Then I took a breath and started crafting the next part of the test. The story was simple. The ticket was stolen. I had no way to replace it. I'd just come out of the hospital after a scare with my heart, and rent was coming due. I needed help. $4,000, not a fortune, but enough to show who would come through and who would turn away. I started with Dad. He picked up on the second ring already, a little defensive. "Lindsay," he said, calling me by my middle name like he always did when something was serious. "I heard about the mess from Nancy. This is why I've always told you to be more careful with valuables." I told him the story, how someone must have taken it, how I wasn't sleeping, how the chest pains had landed me in urgent care for tests. There was a pause, then a sigh. "You should have had a safety net," he said. "You lived too close to the edge." Then he added something I didn't expect. "That's what your grandmother's inheritance was supposed to be." I sat up straighter. "What inheritance?" Dad hesitated. "It got complicated." I pushed. "Complicated how?" He cleared his throat. "It went toward family investments. It wasn't just for you. It was used where it could help everyone." My chest felt tight, but not from any medical reason. I ended the call with him promising to see what he could do, but I already knew he wouldn't. Next was Mom. She answered mid-conversation with Frank. Her voice rushed. "Oh, Meredith, that's awful. Jenna told me. Have you talked to your dad?" I explained everything again, sticking to the script. the fake emergency, the rent, the hospital bill. Well, Frank and I just put a lot into the boutique expansion, she said quickly. We're not exactly liquid right now. When I mentioned what Dad had said about Grandma's money, her tone changed. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything? I'm asking. That was handled years ago, she said firmly. You'd have to ask your father about the details. She offered to check with Frank and then suggested I try Evan instead. I did. I sent a short message. No pressure, just letting him know what was going on and what I needed. He responded within minutes. Dang, that's rough. Let me see what I can do. Then nothing. No follow-up, no second text, no call. Days went by. I left a voicemail. Nothing. Aunt Nancy's call came in the afternoon. Allison told me what happened, she said. You really should have been more responsible. I didn't argue. I just asked for help. $4,000, short term. You should have taken that job at the insurance firm when I offered, she said, her tone clipped. Teaching doesn't lead anywhere. Later, I found a forwarded message from Allison to Nancy sent during the barbecue. It read, she showed Jenna a ticket, said it was real. Now she's acting panicked, probably lost it. Total chaos. Jenna and Matthew were a joint front. Matthew texted first. We can't swing that kind of money. Kids' tuition is brutal this year. Jenna followed up later. Her voice was soft, even rehearsed. I'm sorry this happened to you. Maybe the ticket will turn up. We're just stretched thin right now with the new place. No mention of having seen it. No mention of slipping it into her bag. Colleen and Frank sent a group message. Sorry to hear that, Meredith. We don't have extra cash to cover other people's mistakes. Maybe you can downsize a bit. I wrote each one down. Word for word. Meanwhile, Derek had been texting to check on me. Nothing too serious, just offers to bring coffee or help with lesson planning if I needed time off. He didn't ask for details, didn't pry. He just showed up in his own way. But what caught me off guard was Ryan Chu. He sent a message 2 days after the barbecue. Checked some old records in the attic from your place, he wrote. There's a note about a $20,000 transfer linked to your dad's name. Might be related to what we talked about. Let me know if you want help digging deeper. I thanked him and added his name to the list. A separate list. A shorter one. But the worst part was Allison. I found a text thread between her and Aunt Nancy that had been accidentally shared in a family group chain. In it, she described everything I'd said at the party word for word. She even joked about me freaking out when I couldn't find the ticket, adding a laughing emoji. I stared at the screen for a long time before turning off the phone. That night, I sat on the floor with my notebook open. I read each name, each excuse. Some were expected, others still surprised me. But none of them had offered help, not even $1, all except one name I hadn't tried yet. Aunt Laura. Before I could dial her name, lit up my screen. Meredith, sweetheart, your mother said you might be in trouble. Are you all right? Her voice was soft, familiar, and filled with concern. I hadn't even asked yet. I cleared my throat. I've been better. Tell me everything she said. And so I did. The next morning, I met Aunt Laura at a quiet little diner on the east side of town. She picked the place somewhere she said had the best pancakes and no rush to move you along. It was tucked between a laundromat and a florist, the kind of spot with cracked vinyl booths and a small chalkboard menu on the wall. I got there early and watched through the window as she made her way from her old sedan, one hand on her purse, the other gripping a cane she rarely let anyone see. She wore a faded sweater with a mismatched scarf and smiled the moment she spotted me. You look tired, she said as she pulled me into a hug. Let's get some coffee in you. We sat across from each other, the server already pouring coffee, before we even looked at the menu. I gave her the same story I'd given the others: the stolen ticket, the rent, the hospital bill. I didn't cry. I didn't dramatize it. I just told it straight. She listened without interrupting, nodding slowly as she stirred her creamer into the mug. When I finished, she reached into her purse without a word and pulled out a small envelope. She placed it on the table and slid it toward me. It's $2,500, she said. It's not everything you need, but it's what I've got. Don't worry about paying it back until things settle." I stared at it, my throat tightening. I hadn't asked her for a cent. She didn't ask for details. She just showed up. This was a woman living on a fixed income, managing heart medications, and budgeting groceries down to the dollar, and she still reached into her savings without hesitation. I didn't take the envelope. Not right away. Instead, I looked at her across that chipped table and said, "There's something I need to tell you." Her expression didn't change. She just nodded and waited. I took a breath and lowered my voice. I didn't lose the ticket. I won. $50 million. After taxes, about 30. She didn't blink. She just set her coffee down and folded her hands together. "The story about the ticket was a test," I said. "I needed to know who'd show up when they thought I had nothing." Laura stayed quiet for a moment, then let out a soft breath. "You always were the one holding the family together," she said. "I wondered how long you could keep carrying it." I told her everything. The barbecue Jenna, pocketing the fake ticket, Matthew's threat, the voicemails, the silence. I told her about the messages I'd seen between Allison and Aunt Nancy. I told her how Ryan had found a note about an old transfer tied to my father's name. I even told her what Mom and Dad had said when I asked about the inheritance. That's when her expression shifted. "There's something I've kept quiet for a long time," she said, fingers tightening around her mug. "Your grandmother left money for you and your siblings, $20,000 each." I didn't move. "She gave it to your father to distribute. Said it was meant to be a cushion, a way to help you all start strong. He told her he'd split it evenly. But within a year, it was gone." I swallowed hard. "He said it was used for a family investment," Laura continued. "Pamela's marketing firm, I believe. Your mother knew but didn't push it. She said keeping peace with Frank was more important." She paused and looked at me. I tried to speak up, but they shut me out. The air in the diner felt heavier. "I didn't tell you before," she said gently, "because I didn't want to cause more pain. But you deserve to know the truth." I reached across the table and took her hand. Neither of us said anything for a while. When the check came, she tried to pay. I didn't let her. We walked out slowly together, the wind picking up just enough to tug at her scarf. I helped her to her car and promised I'd call later. That night, I sat on my porch with a notebook in my lap and the envelope she'd given me resting on the armrest. The names I'd written down earlier were still there, each followed by a blank space. I drew a line through all of them except one. Then I flipped to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, "The only one who didn't wait to be asked." The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and made a pot of coffee without turning on the lights. The kitchen stayed quiet as I stood by the window watching the sky shift from blue-gray to gold. My notebook sat open on the counter beside me, the list of names untouched since the night before. All the promises, the excuses, the silence, it was all there in my own handwriting. I tore the page out and folded it in half. Then I picked up my phone and started deleting contacts one by one. Evan Jenna, Matthew Nancy Allison, Mom, Dad. I didn't block them. I didn't send a message. I just erased the access. No more late-night texts asking for favors. No more last-minute calls about emergencies that weren't mine. It took less than 20 minutes to clear out a decade of history. Then I made 2 calls. The first was to Graham Fields, my attorney. I told him it was time to move forward with everything we'd discussed, the housing trust, the long-term care account, the home purchase. He confirmed the paperwork was already in progress and asked if I wanted to schedule a walkthrough for the property we'd selected. The second call was to Aunt Laura. She didn't answer right away, but called back within 10 minutes. I asked if she could meet me that afternoon. No rush, no explanation. She said yes, without hesitation. We met at the same diner in the same booth. She wore the same scarf, though I noticed her hands looked more tired than they had a few days earlier. We didn't order food this time, just coffee and a slice of pie she insisted we split. I waited until the server stepped away before pulling a small folder from my bag. "I've made some decisions," I said, "and this is for you." She looked at the papers without touching them. What is it, a new home? One level, no stairs. Near me. Meredith. And a trust, I continued, for medical care prescriptions. Anything you need. She shook her head, but I saw the corner of her mouth pull just slightly. You don't have to say yes right now, I told her. But it's already done. You took care of me when you didn't have to. Let me do the same. Her eyes stayed on mine for a long time before she reached over and took the folder. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. The rest of the afternoon we sat there quietly sipping coffee as the light outside faded. She asked about my classroom, about Casey, about my car. I asked about her herb garden and whether she still wrote letters to her old friends from the library. It felt like we were rebuilding something that had been quietly ignored by everyone else. That weekend I met with Graham again to finalize the nonprofit filings. The name had already been chosen, Wynn House, in honor of Aunt Laura's maiden name. The mission was simple: to support teachers and aging adults who fell through the cracks. Too often, I'd watched people like me scrape by while others turned a blind eye. Now I could change that. I reached out to Casey first. Her nursing background, plus the fact that she'd always known how to spot a person's real needs, made her the perfect person to help run operations. She didn't hesitate. Tell me when to start, she said. Derek. My colleague at school offered to help sort applications when the time came. Ryan Chu connected me with a few contractors and offered guidance on property renovations. He even flagged a building downtown that could work as a shared community hub. Even Joe, the corner store owner who had sold me the winning ticket, got involved. He donated grocery vouchers and shared a flyer with his customers. I've seen a lot of folks who need help, he told me. Glad someone's doing something. It was small at first. One teacher who needed a new water heater. One woman on a fixed income whose furnace had broken midwinter. But every time we helped someone, it felt like reclaiming a piece of something that had been lost. I didn't post about the lottery win. I didn't announce what I was doing. I didn't tell a single soul from my family what I'd built. But word got around anyway. Evan sent a message through an old friend, a vague question about whether I was doing all right and if I'd had any good news lately. Jenna emailed from an unfamiliar address asking if I'd consider helping with tuition for the twins. We're in a tight spot, she wrote. Matthew left a voicemail pretending he didn't know I'd cut ties. Hope we can chat sometime, he said. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I didn't respond. Every time one of them reached out, I added a mark in the notebook. A quiet reminder. Not to punish, just to remember. By the end of that month, Aunt Laura had moved into her new home. It wasn't flashy, a single-story cottage with a small porch and a fenced yard where she could grow her herbs. I helped her unpack, and Casey stopped by with a welcome basket. You didn't have to do all this, Laura said that evening, looking around the living room as the last of the boxes disappeared. I know, I said, but I wanted to. By early spring, Wynn House was fully operational. We didn't make an announcement. There was no press release or ribbon cutting, just a simple website, a phone number, and a small sign out front with a blue-painted door and a mailbox that stayed full. The first week we helped 3 people: a retired teacher whose roof was leaking, a man in his 70s whose furnace had gone out, and a woman caring for her disabled sister who couldn't afford a wheelchair ramp. Casey handled intake, and Derek stopped by after school to help sort forms. Ryan coordinated with local contractors, most of whom agreed to work below rate once they heard what we were doing. I spent my mornings at school, my afternoons at the office. My life didn't look different from the outside, and that was the way I wanted it. I still drove the same car, still packed the same lunches, still clipped coupons when I shopped. But every time someone came through our door needing help, and we were able to say yes, that was a different kind of wealth. Aunt Laura visited often. She brought muffins, homegrown mint, and clippings from her garden. Sometimes she stayed and helped Casey with the mail. Other times she sat near the front window with a library book keeping company with a pot of chamomile tea. The people who mattered showed up quietly, and the ones who hadn't, they started to notice. It began with a message from Evan. He sent it through an old mutual friend asking how I was and mentioning something vague about new opportunities and reconnecting. I didn't reply. A week later, he tried again, this time directly. A simple text, "Hope you're doing well. We should catch up soon." Jenna emailed from an unfamiliar address. She said they were looking at private school options for the kids and had heard I might be in a position to help. She included a photo of the twins in their uniforms smiling in front of a red brick building. Matthew followed with a voicemail. He sounded casual, upbeat, like he was calling after a Sunday golf game. Just checking in. Thought maybe we could clear the air. He ended with a laugh that didn't land. I didn't answer any of them. Then came the letter from my mother. Not an email, not a voicemail. A handwritten card, in her cursive still neat, still the same blue ink she'd used to sign school permission slips. She didn't apologize. She didn't mention the inheritance or the ticket, just wrote that she hoped I was happy and that maybe we could talk sometime, just the two of us. I kept it in the drawer by my desk at home unopened. Aunt Nancy was next. She called the Wynn House main line, left a message with Casey, and asked to discuss a potential collaboration. Casey asked if I wanted to return the call. I told her no. The last to reach out was Allison. She sent a package. Inside was a photo of us from a family trip years ago, standing in front of a lake, both of us sunburned and laughing. She'd written a note on the back. "I'm sorry if I betrayed your trust. I didn't realize how badly I'd hurt you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I stared at it for a long time. Then I slid it into the same drawer with my mother's card. That Friday, Joe McCarthy dropped off a stack of hand-addressed envelopes from his store. He said customers had asked about the nonprofit and whether they could donate or volunteer. We started a weekend pantry program with the help of a retired couple who used to run the church kitchen. Derek brought his students by to help build raised garden beds out back, and one of the boys painted a mural on the fence, sunflowers, open books, and a tiny cottage that looked just like Aunt Laura's. One afternoon as we were closing up, Casey asked, "Do you ever think about telling them the whole story I didn't answer right away?" She nodded, understanding. "Maybe someday." That night I walked home and stopped by Aunt Laura's porch. She was watering her rosemary and asked if I wanted to stay for tea. We sat side by side in the fading light, and she told me about a new neighbor who had dropped off pie as a welcome. "You've made something good here," she said, watching a pair of sparrows hop along the fence. "Not just the nonprofit. I mean, everything." I didn't say much. I didn't need to, because deep down I already knew the shift had started. Not loudly. Not with confrontation, but with distance, with clarity, and with the knowledge that what had been taken from me, the inheritance, the trust, the support, didn't have the power to shape who I became. I had taken it back, piece by piece. Summer arrived quietly. The days stretched long and warm, the kind that made the neighborhood slow down and open its windows. Wynn House had expanded into weekend outreach care packages, free clinics, transportation for seniors needing checkups. Casey handled scheduling. Derek brought by his students to help with deliveries. Aunt Laura started a monthly letter-writing group at the office for widows who didn't use the internet. One Friday afternoon, as I was sorting invoices for a roofing repair we'd covered, Casey came into my office holding her phone. "You need to see this," she said, handing it over. It was a local blog, not a major paper, just one of those community-run pages that shared school events and neighborhood updates. But the headline was clear: "Local nonprofit helping teachers and seniors gains anonymous backer." There was a photo of our building blue door garden beds out front, mural half faded from the sun. The article didn't mention me by name, but it quoted 3 people we'd helped and hinted at a mysterious founder with deep ties to education and community care. I handed the phone back. Casey watched me. "You okay?" I nodded. It was going to come out eventually. The next week the calls started again. Not from strangers, from family. Evan reached out first. This time he didn't bother pretending. He left a voicemail saying he'd heard about the foundation and was so proud of the work I was doing. He ended with, Maybe we could talk about a project I'm working on, could really use some guidance. Jenna's email came a day later. No greeting. Just a list of expenses, a new school year, uniforms, daycare. You probably have resources for things like this now, she wrote. I didn't answer either one. Then came a knock at the Wynn House front door. I was in the back office reviewing a grant application. Casey called my name gently, and when I stepped into the hallway, I saw my mother standing by the reception desk, holding a small paper bag. She looked thinner. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore the same cardigan I'd seen her wear to holidays 10 years ago. I was in the area, she said quietly. I motioned her to step outside. We sat on the front bench near the herb boxes. I saw the article, she said. I figured it was you. This place feels like something you'd build. I didn't say anything. I wanted to say. She paused. I'm sorry for how things happened. We made choices we thought were right at the time. Maybe we were wrong. She reached into the bag and pulled out a Tupperware dish. I made your favorite, the chicken with rosemary. I wasn't sure if you still liked it. I took the container. Not because I planned to eat it, just because I didn't want to leave it sitting in her lap. Is Dad the one who told you? I asked. She shook her head. No. I saw your Aunt Laura at the pharmacy. She looked good, healthier, happier. She is, I said. There was a pause. Do you hate me? She asked. No, I said without hesitation. I just don't need what you're offering anymore. She looked down, then nodded. I'll go. She stood, and before she walked away, she turned back. I'm glad you're doing well. That night, I added a new page to the notebook. Just one sentence. They're starting to feel what I felt for years, being left out. 2 weeks later, Aunt Nancy sent a formal request through her attorney asking if Wynn House would consider strategic partnership discussions for long-term expansion. Graham forwarded it to me. I declined. Allison wrote again. Her message was longer this time. No excuses, no requests, just a single paragraph that said, I read about what you built. I was wrong. I don't expect anything. I just wanted to say I finally understand. I folded her letter and added it to the same drawer where the others remained. In late July, Ryan called to say he'd found a second property we could convert into transitional housing for teachers between jobs. We toured it together, a yellow duplex on a quiet street-wide porches and plenty of natural light. You want to name this one? He asked. I thought for a moment. Let's call it Olive House, I said, for growth. After we signed the papers, we walked out onto the porch and watched a pair of kids ride by on scooters. The breeze carried the smell of honeysuckle and cut grass. Ryan turned to me. You know, they all know now, right? Your family. I know, I said. You ever think about telling them everything? No. He nodded. Fair enough. That night I stopped by Aunt Laura's. We sat on her porch and watched the sun dip behind the trees. She had a pitcher of lemonade and a stack of thank you cards from the seniors group. They said they want to bake something for the volunteers, she said, handing me one of the notes. I smiled, running my thumb over the edge of the card. Without saying a word, I knew she understood. They all knew now, but none of them would be invited back in. A year after that first fake lottery ticket slipped into Jenna's pocket, my life no longer resembled the one I had before it. My apartment was gone, replaced by a small house tucked on a quiet street where I could drink coffee on the back porch each morning without checking my bank app. The Civic still sat in the driveway, though it didn't rattle anymore. Ryan had quietly replaced the alternator months ago and refused to take payment. Wynn House had grown slowly, steadily into something bigger than I ever imagined. We'd helped over 100 people by then. Teachers just like me, who had spent decades buying their own supplies and eating lunch standing up. Seniors like Aunt Laura, who had no one else looking out for them, but still gave what little they had when asked. Casey ran day-to-day operations now. Derek helped with donor outreach. Ryan had taken over property development, securing a third site for emergency housing. On weekends, we hosted free classes, financial basics, cooking on a budget, even resume coaching for older workers trying to return to the field. No one asked where the money came from. They just saw that help finally arrived when they needed it most. I never told the full story. Not to the board, not to our volunteers, not even to the people closest to me. Only Aunt Laura knew everything: the ticket, the test, the inheritance, the silence that followed. And she never told a soul. The people I'd once called family faded to the edges. They stopped calling after a while. No dramatic endings. Just distance like fog rolling back after a storm. I never blocked them. I never sent a message. I didn't need to. They had taught me something I wouldn't forget: that loyalty built on convenience isn't loyalty at all. It took a fake ticket, a desperate lie, and a silent truth to learn that blood doesn't always mean love. And that love, real love, shows up when nothing is guaranteed. Aunt Laura's health improved with the move and the care. Her color returned. Her steps grew steadier. She started volunteering at the library again. Sometimes we'd sit in her sunroom, both of us working quietly, her writing thank you notes, me reviewing grant requests. Other times, we didn't say anything at all. We didn't need to. She was the only one who showed up when I asked for nothing. And that will always matter more than anything money can buy. Looking back, I don't regret any part of the test. Not the lie, not the silence, not even the heartache. Because what came out of it wasn't bitterness or revenge. It was clarity. It was peace. It was a life I chose on purpose, not one I inherited, not one I begged for. And if you're listening to this wondering if it's too late to draw your line, let me tell you, it's not. You get to decide who comes with you into the life you're building. You get to choose your people. And sometimes the ones who truly belong weren't family by birth, but by choice. Thank you for listening to my story. If it spoke to something you've lived through, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Let me know where you're listening from and maybe, just maybe, who really showed up when you had nothing to give.